This is Akashwani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you discussion on prospects of solar energy to foster sustainable development in the country and hurdles in its growth. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Rajesh Lake, anchor.
Warm welcome, Mr. Narendra Taneja, to Akashvani. What are the current prospects and potential of solar energy in fostering sustainable development in India?
Well, when look at the geographical parking of India, luckily we are very blessed in terms of solar radiation, and practically like 10 months a year. And then during monsoon time also, many parts of the country still have reasonably good amount of access to solar radiation. And as you know, solar radiation, the quality of radiation in some parts of India is very good. In some parts of India, it may not be as good as, for instance, most solar power producers would like to have. There are multiple reasons for that. But in terms of sustainable development, what is important is that we protect our nature, we protect our rivers, we protect our earth, we protect our environment, and of course, we protect overall quality of air in the country. And so when you look at sustainable development, especially from the Indian context, which, as you know, is a densely populated country at the same time, then it becomes very important that, that we produce and consume energy in such a way which is A, very sustainable, and B, at the same time, given the kind of economic realities of India, is more affordable. So therefore, when we look around various options like oil or natural gas or other sources of energy, we find that solar is probably a source which works very well for India. A, economics. B, because we enjoy this good quality radiation and the kind of, amount of radiation. And at the same time, when you look at it, the whole country and the kind of, geography we have, that it works very well for us. So therefore, the government focus on solar. In fact, ideally, we should have kind of had focus on solar. Let's say we should have started 30 years ago, but better late than never. And the result is that if you look at, for instance, all around, India has done very well in terms of, installed capacity of solar power generation. If you look at the numbers in the last 9 years, we have increased, solar power installed capacity by 30 times, which is a kind of world record. Very few countries in the world, for instance, can match that. And from what we were, let's say, 10 years ago, from where we stand today, we are now in the region of 82 gigawatt solar power installed capacity. Okay. And it's part of the same mission. It's sustainable development, affordable power, and at the same time making sure that India's economy is expanding as fast as possible in a more sustainable manner.
So very rightly said, in 9 years, 30 times we have increased our solar installation. So India's solar power sector is, Narendraji, a sunshine opportunity waiting to be tapped with estimated potential of 7,50,000 megawatts, from job creation, which you mentioned a while back, to fostering innovation and more. Is the solar power market key to India's economic development and energy transition going forward?
The simple answer is actually yes, because right now look at the scenario. Look at our economy, look at our hard currency, reserves, and even the, rupees exchange value, and for that matter, even fiscal deficit. Since we are so heavily dependent on imports for energy, especially when it comes to oil and to a very great extent, even natural gas, it's a huge burden on our economy. We are importing roughly 88% of our total requirement of oil, and we consume roughly 5.4 million barrels of oil every day, and bulk of that is imported, which means you have to pay in dollars. And when you do that, on the one hand, you are very vulnerable in terms of India's energy security because you're dependent on other countries. And at the same time, economics of it is a huge burden on our hard currency reserves, it's a burden on fiscal deficit, and at the same time, we have no control over the price because when you're buying from international market, you have no control. At the same time, we are so blessed in terms of solar, so blessed. So the whole idea now, the strategy is to tap into solar as aggressively as possible. So that's going to help us on three different fronts. Number one, help us reduce our dependence on imports for oil and natural gas and, other sources of energy. And at the same time, it will, for instance, reduce burden on our hard currency reserves. So we can use those reserves for other things. And third, more importantly, it will help us become energy independent. which for a country of India's size and strategic location and geopolitical location becomes very, very important. It's not a very happy situation where a country of India's size is so heavily dependent on imports for such a critical, commodity like oil or natural gas for that matter. So therefore, this is the government move to use solar as a kind of catalyst in terms of the overall renewable energy revolution in the country, which would of course include hydrogen, so that we can become energy independent by 2047. That's the kind of agenda. And then, the milestones are being kind of set up, working backward. And aggressively, the government is moving in that direction. 2030, we've got a destination solar power agenda. And similarly, we have got for hydrogen and for other sources of renewable energy. So our idea is to go for sustainable development, become energy independent, and at the same time, make energy available to every single Indian at a very affordable price.
So, if I may add, India's vision for 2030 is a mosaic of renewable energy dominance with a significant focus on green growth to fight climate change and enable energy transition. And Narendra ji, guided by the Panch Amrit policy as announced at COP26, what targets has India set for itself to usher in renewable revolution?
Today, when you look at, for instance, the global renewable energy landscape, and you look at different major players on the ground, including developed countries. In fact, India has done better than most developed countries, most European countries, most OECD countries in terms of achieving renewable energy targets. India has walked the talk. Whatever we promised in Paris, whatever we promised in Glasgow, we have actually walked the talk. In some cases, we have already delivered. So therefore, we enjoy this reputation now in the world that when it comes to green energy targets, so India actually is walking the talk. And that's why we can tell other countries, those who especially try to lecture us, we can lecture them back and say, all right, look, we have already done it. What about you? Now, that said, at the same time, our challenge is that we still have widespread energy poverty in the country. When I say widespread energy poverty, people have access to electricity. Before 2014, for instance, look at data. 30 crore Indians didn't have access to electricity. 30 crore. In less than 10 years, today every Indian has access to electricity. There's not a single village which doesn't have access to electricity. So mobilizing electricity for those 30 crore people was not an easy task, but it has been achieved and the world is applauding India for that. Now, secondly, at the same time, to make sure that these people who are below energy poverty line, it doesn't mean they don't have any energy. They have energy. They have access to LPG cylinder. They have access to electricity. They have access to bulbs. Many of them have access to, of course, mobile phones and all that. But when I say energy poverty means they don't have access to the same amount of energy that people in big cities like Delhi or Bombay or Chennai, Hyderabad or Calcutta have. And we are in democracy. It's important if I have got 2 air conditioners running my house, then how can you deny to people living in a far-flung village in UP or Bihar or Orissa or West Bengal or anywhere for that matter. So that's what I mean. It does mean that they have access. Every Indian has access to electricity now. The idea is to mobilize more energy, especially in the far-flung and rural areas, so that people have A, access to more comforts using that energy, and B, also so that they can start their own industrial units. A smaller one, micro one, a super micro one, so that they can generate their own jobs and they can basically help stimulate their own economy. So that's the agenda. Energy, as you know, is critical for all these things. But the third and a very important aspect of the whole thing is that now the new government initiative where the government is actually promoting that you can actually own your own powerhouse. When I say power, it doesn't mean that you have something massive. It means that it's small kind of, panel on your rooftop, so that you can generate your own electricity for your own needs, for your own consumption. If you have anything surplus, you can sell it into the grid. That goes into the grid and you get money for it. So first of all, you have electricity for your own use, and then you also actually have got electricity, the panel on your rooftop, which is a solar panel, in order to help to your monthly income. So in fact, if you look at the overall ambition of India to tap into solar power, this thing, we are talking of a kind of revolution on the ground. The government has taken initiative, policies have been made, policy infrastructure have been put in place, majority of states, irrespective of which parties in power, are being taken on board, and now the push is there. And the good part is that, it's not only top down, it's also bottom up, because people are also taking it up. Panchayats are taking it up, small units are taking it up. The result is that, on the one hand, you have the best effort from the government. At the same time, you see initiatives also kind of coming up from the ground. So I think we are in a very happy and win-win situation.
You're very right. The Government of India's commitment to solar power is not just in words, but in comprehensive policies and initiatives like the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, PLI, for the National Program on High Efficiency Solar PV Modules. Would you elaborate on the various schemes that are there?
You see, this is a very important area. As you know, as he said, the India's plan now, the government strategy is that we want to be, energy independent by 2047. And for countries of India's size and the energy requirement, is easier said than done, which means there's a lot of hard work which the government has to do, various state governments have to do, various, corporates have to do, whether the public sector or the private sector and so on and so forth. At the same time, government is decentralizing, involving panchayats, involving local bodies in the whole process. Here, the main factor is that what government is trying to incentivize now is that solar power equipment, solar power panels, cells, that we can bring down our dependence on imports to zero. Right now, our dependence on imports, especially from China, is very, very high. So now the government is giving all these incentives so that, more manufacturers and India's corporates can come forward. And they set up, gigafactories, which they've already started doing, in order to manufacture these equipments here in India. So that will help us, A, reduce our dependence on countries like China. B, it will help us to create more jobs. And then C, it will actually help us bring down the price of these equipments and cells and panels and so forth. And fourth, which is very important, since we are the headquarters, India took initiative. We are the headquarters of India's Solar Alliance, which means that we are taking the lead not only within the country but globally on these matters. So it will also help us to kind of export solar power equipment, panels, cells, and other things to other fellow developing countries.
And also in the agriculture sector, there is a scheme called the PMKUM scheme, which is aimed at achieving solar power capacity addition of 30.8 gigawatts by March 2026. This surely is going to transform India's agriculture sector by setting up decentralized solar power plants, which will replace the agriculture diesel pumps with solar agriculture water pumps and solarizing existing grid-connected agriculture pumps. What's your take on it?
This is actually a very, very interesting initiative in the sense that, where the village actually becomes a very important unit of the whole story. In the sense, on the one hand, they will have their own kind of solar power plants on the rooftop, in the farm, or in the area wherever there is space in that village. And at the same time, they'll be able to use the electricity generator there for irrigation, for maybe micro industrial units. And also at the same time, if they need it, they can use that to connect with the grid and sell it. And there are also initiatives, for instance, which have been already taken in some parts of the country. You can see that to some extent in Gujarat already, where you can use the land that you own on the one hand for agriculture, for your crops, but at the same time, wherever possible, you can actually install solar power panels there. And you can use that also for power generation. So the government is giving initiative for that too at the same time. So I think the overall idea, the approach of the government is on the one hand to make the villages energy independent.
Any hurdles that the government has to cross?
It all depends on the quality of governance in the area we are talking about. In some states, for instance, the quality of energy governance or the overall governance is better than the other states. Honesty, governance, the training of the people, and taking the scheme to the rural village areas and engaging with them and so on and so forth. So it depends from state to state. And the challenges are basically in three areas. Number one is training. Number one is creating awareness. You have to create awareness. And then, for instance, connecting the people there with the kind of offer and the scheme the government has made available so they can tap into it. But it's a long journey, but I think we are moving, the country is doing reasonably well.
On that note, thank you for all your inputs and thank you for being with Akashvani.
Thank you very much.
You are listening to a discussion on prospects of solar energy to foster sustainable development in the country and hurdles in its growth. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Rajesh Lake, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com